Welcome to the Spaghetti Wall podcast, where we dive into life.
Both the messy parts and the moments of joy, and everything in between. I'm Jason Wilcox, licensed clinical social worker.
And I'm Dr. Thaen Saelee, a licensed clinical psychologist.
Welcome to our show today. Today we're going to talk about weaponized incompetence. Now, Tan, you were reading about this yesterday. What were you finding out when you were reading about it?
I thought it was supposed to be like intentional or unintentional. I wasn't sure, but what I found out was that it's intentional behavior that someone does to get out of doing something. And it usually is seen in like a dyadic relationship where, it could be a partnership, romantic partnership. It could be within a work relationship. It could be within a family dynamic. So it's just any two people, really.
So it's when somebody pretends to be incompetent to manipulate somebody else to either get out of work or to make their situation better.
Yeah, so like a work example would be a colleague says, "Oh, Tan, you're so good at doing that. I'm not really, when I do it doesn't turn out as good as you. So it'll be great if you take that over." So it's kind of like putting the task onto the person that's maybe more competent or have done better or perceived to be better at doing something, and really putting that responsibility or task off from themselves.
Mm-hmm. So what's the difference with the example you're giving when someone's just sincerely recognizing someone has more skills, more competence, and they're just saying, yeah, would you be willing, or is this something you can take on because I'm not quite as good as you at this?
I think the key word when I was reading the article was really stress on intentionality, right? So knowing that maybe you could do it and you're don't want to do it, and maybe you're being a little bit passive about it, and you're giving a compliment to increase the likely that this person will be like, okay, I'll do it. So it's a form of manipulation in that way. The article also talks about, and I think this is true too, like assessing the fairness of division of labor too, whether it's a work environment or the home environment. Mostly we're talking about couples who this happens in, and how one couple might start to feel, especially if you're the partner who's more competent. I think weaponized incompetence, it's adjacent to what I call the burden of competence. So if you're someone who is very competent, then you end up taking on the burden of all the work. And so looking at, is it fair? Is work divided equally? Those are aspects that are important to look at when we're trying to assess, like, am I getting tricked into doing another work? Am I the one that's holding the burden of work? But also mental load, having to be responsible, thinking of organizing, getting things together, planning things. That's also a form of task. The mental load of having to be responsible and think about and take care of all these things too. So it doesn't just have to be a physical, tangible thing.
Gotcha. So if I hear you correctly, the main difference here is when somebody uses their pretend incompetence to get out of something and to get someone else to feel responsible or to get them to do the task or whatever it is. So like, let's say dishes. The one partner says, I'm just not very good at getting those things clean. I can never get it to sparkle, and puts this responsibility on their partner, even though they know they absolutely can. And so all this is getting put on the partner versus someone that goes, yeah, I know that your trick to doing this is really good, but it's a sincere thing. It's not that they're saying I'm incompetent and can't do it, and I'm not trying to get out of it. It's more of just, hey, we both got our strengths. You got some here. And if the person being said you're more competent or better at it said, no worries, you go ahead and do it anyways. If it's not weaponized incompetence, the person's going to say, no problem, I'll go for it because it's not a manipulation, right? Would that be accurate?
Yeah, I think, again, yeah, looking at intentionality and what this person is actually capable of, but why they're not wanting to do it. And so I think, yeah.
Now, this is pretty destructive to have happening in a relationship. I mean, it's really manipulative and moving towards that passive aggressive approach of communication.
I think it really corrodes trust and dependability. Like the person who is the one doing all the things is going to feel very, very weighted down and feel resentment and sometimes feels all responsible. I think that disengages the connection because then now this other person needs to be treated like a child or this other person needs constant micromanaging. It becomes exhausting and almost codependent.
Yeah, I could see how that would become codependent. So I'm curious, what are thoughts or ideas you would have for a couple that finds himself in this spot?
I think that's a difficult, like it's not a one answer response, you know. I think it depends on how insightful this couple is and the partnership, how well they already communicate. And so I think the first step is just naming it and describing the behavior without using these buzzwords. So I think one of the purpose of us using and describing and talking about this word, weaponized incompetence, is just to encourage folks to not use it as a buzzword. So the first step is describe the behavior, not use these buzzwords. So don't go to your partner and go, "Hey, I read up on this and I learned about this and you are doing it to me." Don't do that.
Yeah, it falls into that trap that we talked about in the last episode where you hear these buzzwords, you hear these things, and the reality of it is we're all human. And so there's going to be human elements of here inside of this idea, right? There's going to be times where your partner's going to be like, I'm not sure how to do that. And you're going to step in. I mean, Tana and I, we both have things like this. There's things I go do, like fix some of the roof stuff. There's a good chance if I would looked at you to do it, you'd be like, oh, Jason, do you mind stepping in on that one? And it'd be no big deal. And there's things that you do as well that I don't fully know or I've never done. And you take it on and you just take care of it. It's not that I'm not willing to learn. It's not that I'm not willing to do. It just works well because we kind of divide and conquer and make things work. So I think it's important that when you hear these terms, you don't just all of a sudden go, oh my gosh, my partner said those things or did those things. Now that must mean they're doing weaponized incompetence. No, that's not what it means. It means that there's a lot of humanness in the definition of weaponized incompetence. And the defining difference is your partner doing it to manipulate you to get out of things so they don't have to share in the burden of responsibilities? Or is it just humanness happening with this partner?
Correct. So I have another example from our life. Last week, we had a recipe on our weekly dinner menu, bean lop. It's kind of usually a traditional Southeast Asian dish, but instead of using beef, we're using beans as the protein. And our daughter said, "Hey, I want to make this." And I think, Jason, you use this verbatim statement that comes from the article, using it as this is an example when you're being tricked into doing something. But you go, "I don't know how to make it. I don't know what all goes into it. I don't know how to season it." And someone reading that article might go, "Well, there's an example of my husband doing that to me." But again, slowing down the scene here, for me, I didn't think that about your statement because, as you highlighted, we have a good division of labor here. We do have, I feel like, fair and just agrarian division of tasks and responsibility in the house with the kids, with shopping, with cooking. So not once ever did I go, every time you say that, every time you say you don't know a recipe, you can't make curry, you don't know how to make stir fried, like, oh my gosh, you're putting it all on me. In reality, you're not, because we have this good relationship.
Well, and I think this is a great example because that's a time when I said it and you just jumped in and took care of it. There's other times I've said that before because these are recipes that you've grown up making and I haven't. And so there's other ones like Thai chicken noodle soup as an example, right? There was at one point in our relationship, I was like, I don't know how to make that one. And at that time it worked well. You weren't busy or I wasn't busy. And it worked well for you to be like, well, let me show you. And I was like, absolutely. And so then I learned it and now I make it and I know it. And it would be the same thing with the bean lop. If you were like, oh, let me show you, let me send the recipe, whatever, that'd be fine. It would be no big deal. I don't mind doing it at all. So I'm not using it to try to manipulate or get out of something. It was just the honest truth. I don't know. So then you had a choice on your end of, oh, do I just jump in and do it? Do I teach Jason? Or there was another one that happened. I can't remember which recipe it was. Well, there was one that you're like, I think it's cooking salmon, and you mentioned it, and I
Oh,
was like, and I
seasoning the
wasn't, and
salmon,
I was like, I
yes.
wasn't sure, and you were like, just, I just kind of make stuff up anyways. And I was like, oh, okay. So then I just jumped in and I made up my own seasoning and stuff like that. It seemed like there was one other that you had done, and you were in a hurry though, and so I just looked up a recipe, and I just found a recipe online and did it. But these are all examples of it's never my intention when I say something like that to try to manipulate. It's just the honest truth of where I'm at with my knowledge and expertise on something.
Right. I think there's the situation with our teenagers too. I think like doing the dishes or doing household chores is another big hot button topic where this word comes into play. Like our kids have chores at home. And so, they will say things exactly from the article, like, I don't know how to load the dishwasher right. Like, you never taught me or you never showed me. And again, for those situations, we just jump in and say, "Well, we'll show you. What are you confused about?" And it's never really about them getting out of doing their chores. It's always like, "I don't, how do you cut this?" Or "I don't know where our tools are." They're always asking for clarification and not trying to get away from doing their chores. So I think that is a great discernment here that you're picking up, Jason, that like, assess if this person is trying to get out of doing it or not.
Yeah, it would be I think that might be the tool here though, is if you feel like your partner's doing that, it's just the question mark of, oh, like if it was the lop example, right? Making the lop. If you thought I was doing that to you, it'd be a great moment for you to just pause and go, oh, if I give you the recipe, do you mind making it? It would be in that moment, if it's not weaponized incompetence, it would just be like, oh, yeah, absolutely. I don't mind. I'll go off the recipe. Or if that makes me feel a little uncomfortable, then I would just say something back of, okay, but do you mind making with me this time while I do the recipe or something like that, right? There's going to be the reality the person's okay still doing it. They're just have either some knowledge or they're not feeling fully confident. There's something like that going on if it's not weaponized incompetence. There's that willingness to still come to the table when it's not weaponized incompetence. I had a client who talked about this topic where their partner was telling them they're doing weaponized incompetence. And in his example, it was interesting because what was happening is that he would do the chores actually, but he would either miss something or not do something to the level the other person wanted. And so the person was saying, you're doing weaponized incompetence on me. But the problem here is it's not. He really just honestly missed some things or didn't quite do it to the level that she thought needed to be done. And the trick here is to knowing whether it is or isn't, is he was more than willing if she came and said, hey, you missed this thing. He was more willing to go do that. It was no big deal. So this shows that it's not purposeful. This is just something about his mind and his brain and how it worked when he was doing that chore.
Well, Jason, what would be some recommendation for couples when it's actually happening? How do you confront it? How do you resolve it?
I think we always move back to assertive communication. So let's use the bean lop example. Let's say Tan came to me, or we decided, hey, let's make bean lop tonight. And I said what I said of, I don't know how to make that. And Tan said, oh, well, I'll get you the recipe, or hey, let's make it together. And if I said, well, no, I just think it's better you do it, or I would never be good enough to do that. If I start trying to still find ways to get out of that, this is where you would want to use assertive communication and say something along the lines of, are you saying that you don't want to do this? Or are you willing to do it if I show you how, or you have the skills, or we get you up to par to doing it? So you just be like kind of finding out, what are they saying exactly here? Is it that truly they're just saying, I'm not going to?
Yeah, it might reflect something like, sounds like you're not really wanting to make this, and check in and see where that goes. I think it's really hard for me to put myself in those situations in where I would feel that you were doing that to me because I don't experience it with you. So yeah, I have a hard time like imagining these scenarios because I don't live it.
Yeah, it is, right? If that's not happening. I'm just thinking about those that are trying to figure out, is this happening to you and what to do about it. And I think to kind of summarize or bring back around the tools is, one, just be assertive, right? Ask if they're willing to do it if you gave them the information or gave them the skills. Two, would you, if they're still trying to bypass, then just confront what's going on here, asking bluntly, are they saying they don't want to or not willing to? And this will bring out a better communication because you're trying to get them to just admit they don't want to do it or not willing to do it. Because if they admit that, then you can have a healthier conversation of, okay, then let's talk about our responsibilities here in the home. How do we balance these? How do we make sure we both are taking a balanced approach here?
I like coming from a strength-based approach. So I think reassessing. Okay, so it sounds like in the past 10 years since we've been married, Jason, you have not been wanting to do X, Y, and Z. What would you feel more comfortable doing? Would you be able to trade this chore for this chore? So I like that part of reevaluating and maybe addressing the avoidant behavior or the chores or the tasks that are not being done and redistributing things that maybe this person is better doing or already know how to do. So I'd like that extra piece of redistributing responsibility and assignments of tasks.
I also think it'd be important if you really do find that your partner is intentionally doing this, that they're doing weaponized incompetence, and they own it, they admit that they're actually not wanting to do this thing, and they're using pretend incompetence to get you to do it. I think it'd be important to invite them and request they don't do that anymore. That if there's something they don't want to do, that they just openly admit to it so you guys can have a conversation about it and talk about, well, what do you do about the responsibilities in the home? I think that would go a lot further. There's more complicated skills here if the partner's not willing to admit and the partner is actually doing it. But this is where the cautionary tale comes back into play. It's really critical you're not accusing your partner of these things if you are not 100% positive they're doing it.
Statistically, we're all human. We all make mistakes. We all have these kind of patterns of behaving and coping and communicating. And that it's really important that for the most part, I think the general population, let's just say, we all are guilty of doing this behavior where we avoid something. But for I think the bigger percentage of people not doing weaponized incompetence is higher. That number is higher. And I think we're saying more than likely there's a smaller percentage of people who are actually intentionally using this type of manipulation that fits this category. So we're just, wanting people to be mindful of that just because we're hearing something and some behaviors check off, that's not the full assessment and that's not the full picture.
Right. Because, it would have been, I would not have felt very good if when I said what I said about the LOP, if you looked at me and been like, you're weaponizing incompetence now. I would have been like, what? What are you talking
Yeah, I'd be
about?
like, see here, I'm gonna pull up the article, screenshot it for you, highlight that statement. But I didn't do that.
Right.
I mean, again, and if you guys get the sense of like listening to Jason and I, we have a very dynamic relationship where there's a lot of give and take, ebb and flow, lots of collaboration and partnership, lots of clarifying question, lots of naming things and talking through things.
Going back to a point I was making earlier, if you're stating weaponized incompetence to your partner and they're not doing it, it's going to create rifts in the relationship.
Mm.
You're going to start creating problems there that didn't need to be. There's a better way to kind of converse about these things, and it's important to recognize there's a strong likelihood if they're doing some of the behaviors that are defined under weaponized incompetence, there's a strong likely it's not weaponized incompetence. I did think of one other real quick thing on this topic is the reality I've seen in couples sometimes where one partner kind of goes to the extreme on outcomes needing to be perfect. So like there can't be one dish that comes out of the dishwasher with an ounce of something on it, or they're really upset with their partner. And if this is the case, it's going to create other problems in the relationship too. right? Because if you're sitting here looking at your partner that they're weaponizing incompetence when there's one small detail that's missing or that's not quite accurate, this is going to cause a lot of problems in the relationship too, because no one's perfect. We're going to have lots of things that don't always work out exactly like we want, or it's not to its exactness.
Yeah, I think you're going into the realm of like perfectionistic standards, the need to micromanage and control, OCD traits. And so um, I do agree there is something about your comment is bringing up the thought of what I mentioned earlier. The opposite of weaponized incompetence is the burden of competence. So if you find yourself being on that other shoe where you feel like you're taking on all the load, you feel like you're needing to manage and take care of everything because you are the only competent one in the relationship, then I encourage you to assess yourself and assess how you are using assertive communication, how you're asking for help, how you're setting boundaries, and how you're talking about expectations and unmet needs in the relationship. I think it goes both ways. We have 50% to show up when there is a partnership. And so I thought that was worth mentioning when you're talking about just the likelihood of your partner being accused or not accused, where then you probably feel you are the one holding the burden of competence in the relationship.
Yeah. I mean, because there's a reality. I would get really frustrated if I was the one that did the dishes every night. And every time I did dishes, you always found one little thing wrong with what I did. I would get to a point where it's like, okay, I'm done doing dishes. Like if you're gonna nitpick it that much, I would prefer you do the dishes and I will do something else. Thankfully, you don't do those things, but it's something to consider if you're doing that to your partner where you are looking for perfectionism in everything they do. This is going to create a reaction in your partner. It's going to make them very unmotivated to want to do things.
I think the last part of this is I wonder, if it's gender based or people perceive it as gender based. And I bring this up because most people say, oh, well, men are just that way, or, the women is responsible for these things. And, we're in 2026. Like, division of labor is quite common nowadays. So if those values are as well, you are the female, you should do these things. You should be good at doing these things. You should be responsible for doing these things. Why aren't you doing these things? And so I just want to bring that up in thinking about and not putting these behaviors as it's a guy behavior or it's a woman's behavior. So I just want to caution listeners to think about that. I bring this up because there was a comedian and he talked about this topic, but in a way where he was encouraging men to do this behavior. He said, well, you know what? You want to get out of doing something? Here's an example, right? My wife asked me to make rice and I purposely burned it. And for the rest of our marriage, she never asked me to make rice. And everyone's laughing, everyone thinks it's funny. And I'm sitting there going, that's effed up,
Yeah.
dude.
Yeah, that would be pretty awful to do to your partner. Instead, if you really didn't want to make rice, it's important to just have a conversation about it. And again, and talk about how then is an appropriate way to balance the responsibilities in the home. But yeah, to get out of things by damaging or not doing it to your best ability, yeah, that's not helpful. That's once again gonna harm the relationship.
Yeah, and again, it's a gender based, he was appealing to the men in the audience. And I'm a female. I'm sitting there going, what the heck? This doesn't sound funny to me.
Well, I would throw out there that whatever gender you are, responsibilities to create the life you're trying to create needs to be balanced. I do run into this sometimes with clients where they'll believe since one's the woman and one's the man, that the woman has to take care of all the household duties, even though they both work full time. That makes no sense. It's interesting because if I was that woman, I'd be like, seriously, just because I have a vagina and you have a penis means that I have to take on all of the load of work around here? Like, that makes no sense.
I've seen it in the reverse too, where the man is expected to be the breadwinner and bring in the financial support, but then he's also coming home and doing the dishes and cooking the meals and making sure the kids are ready for bed. He's also doing the domestic load at home. So I've seen it in the reverse too, where it's like, well, you still need to go to work and make money and pay the bills, but then when he comes home, nothing is done, nothing is, prepared, and he's the one carrying extra load now. And so it's completely can go the other way too.
Yeah, I think I agree with you 100% on that if the partner isn't doing anything. Because let's say they have like 5 kids and some of these kids are at home, that stay home partner might have been busy all day long. So, of course, not everything is going to be done because parenting is a nonstop job. It's always going.
Mhm.
So, yeah, if everything could be done during the day that can be done, that's important to do if that's your responsibility on your side of this partnership. And at the same time, though, if the partner at home did do all that they could and there's still stuff to be done when the working partner comes home, well, yeah, they need to jump in. They're not there to take over the whole load. They're there to partner. So it goes back to balance. How do you balance the chores? So if it's not being balanced and this partner that worked all day comes home and takes over everything, that doesn't work either. You're unbalanced again. So I think to wrap things up, be careful with hearing trending terms. That's going to be a message you'll probably hear in our other podcasts and in the future when we see trending terms and people just grab onto them and then start making human behavior that's normal turn into this thing that they read online when it's not accurate. So be careful of that. If it is happening, right, assertive communication, try to find out if the person is really just not wanting to do this or if they really just need knowledge or reminders or whatever it is to be successful.
Yeah, as always, be honest, be genuine, self-assess, and be kind to each other. As always, if anything on this podcast has spoken to you or resonated with you, or you feel like someone else is wanting to or being interested in listening, please visit our podcast, The Spaghetti Wall. We also have a website, www.abbotcounseling.org, and check out some of our other couples material and worksheets.